Sykes, the Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast. We've got a great show for you this week, but before we get into the show, if you find this episode valuable, please like, share, and subscribe so we can help more independent pharmacy owners. Also, visit us at pharmacyaccounting.com. If you're overpaying in tax, if you're prepping to start, buy, or sell a pharmacy, or just have a gut feeling that your financials aren't quite right, we have a suite of services for every need your pharmacy is facing. Go to pharmacyaccounting.com and we can help you. Okay, now on to the show.
Yeah, Joshua, after we met, Ollin and I met you at NCPA, the ownership workshop, we were really impressed with your story because obviously in independent pharmacy right now, no matter where you are, there's so many hurdles and struggles, and everyone's, depending on what community you're in and what kind of contracts you have, everything's different, right? But everybody has some struggles. So it was interesting to hear your story and just the different things that you are overcoming to become successful in your area. So it was just a neat different podcast guest today, but we really do appreciate you.
Absolutely. And Joshua, first thing, why don't you just kind of tell us about Saipan, where that's located for our American viewers here. They may not know where Saipan is. And I know you described how far it was from Honolulu and United flights that bring your McKesson materials there, etc. So tell us about where Saipan is.
Yeah, so Saipan is part of the Northern Marianas Island chains. So we're out in the Pacific. We're right next to Guam. So we have, the Guam, military bases not far from us. We're essentially about a 7.5-hour flight from Honolulu. 3.5 hours from Japan, so if you can kind of triangulate that. But yeah, it's a U.S. territory. The Northern Marianas Islands is primarily comprised of three islands. There's Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. There's a lot of historic war relics still here, back from when America and Japan were at war. And if you actually visit the island of Tinian, they actually still have the bunker where the bomb was stored, because the plane that bombed Hiroshima left from Tinian, and that bunker is still there, and they have pictures of the actual bomb in there. And it's recently we just had, I think, a 80th year memorial since the bombing of Hiroshima, and so there's been a lot of memorial things still going on this year. But there's a lot of history here.
Did we meet you in DC? Is that right?
No, we met him at Nashville, Tennessee. In
right,
the
second one. Gotcha. That's right.
He went to the ownership workshop.
That's right. I remember, Austin, we told Joshua that he definitely won the prize for the longest travel participant at the workshop.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So he definitely
to fame.
Amazing. I remember Ollin seeing your badge, because the badges at the workshop have the name, and they may have the pharmacy, and then real small they have Kentucky. They usually say whatever, Texas maybe. So and Ollin was like, Saipan. So that was awesome.
We often get confused with Asian countries. I've had friends asking what it's like living in Taiwan, and I'm like, I don't live in Taiwan. But yeah, it's a U.S. territory, and sometimes that's one of the struggles for us is I might call a Walgreens in Seattle for a transfer, and the pharmacist will tell me, sorry, I can't transfer to other countries. And okay, we got to go through the spiel now. Okay, we're a U.S. territory. You can Google it. We pay pay taxes to the same IRS. I mean, we're part of the U.S.
So how many pharmacies are there total in Saipan?
There are about 7-ish pharmacies. Okay. On Saipan. There's a telepharmacy sort of remote on Tinian and Rhoda, because they have very limited services out there.
Right. Awesome.
And I remember you told me, say how good my memory is, that you had worked at Walmart in Hawaii, I think for 11 years. Is that
12
correct?
years, yes.
12 years. I'm sorry. Missed that one.
Nope.
And that you'd gone to school to University of Hawaii.
Yes, sir.
So I remember that. And then I think you had said you had been to Saipan for either 9 or 11 years.
Yep, just made 11 years this year.
There you go.
I'm impressed.
How about that, Bonnie?
I mean, I don't remember all that. I mean, I enjoy.
You didn't even remember what town we met him at.
Talk a few minutes before this call. I don't know. But it is interesting to talk about, the role of independent pharmacies, whether you're here in the States or wherever you are. You're definitely like a community hub, regardless. And we have a client that we're working with right now that's doing a startup in his community, the type of community I don't want to specify, but you have to work at what makes sense for you. But obviously it's even more important in your area, like you talk about, there's only 7 pharmacies. So talk to us about that, being, the role of a pharmacy in a community, especially like a tight knit island setting like you have.
Yeah, well, and I should probably specify too, there's about 3 pharmacy entities. So we have 3 of them. There's another independent pharmacy that has 3, and then there's a hospital outpatient pharmacy, which sort of makes the 7.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I feel make independent pharmacy unique out here. I mean, one, we only have independent pharmacy. We don't have any big chains. We don't have any big stores, any Walmart, CVS, Target. I mean, we don't have any of that. And so it's always finding ways to, provide new services and diversify. And that was, a lot of the things that, I try to pick up when I go to these conferences during the summer is what else can we do? And it seems like there's a lot of stuff that still can be done. But yeah, so it's always trying to figure out that next step on how we can provide new services.
And I assume logistics are a little harder for you when it comes to ordering and delivery and things like that.
Yeah. So for us, we get our DCs in Hawaii. So previous to a few years ago, our company had been, AmerisourceBergen customers for 20-something years. And they pretty much only offer once a week delivery. So that presents a lot of challenges. One being that we have to keep a higher level of inventory on hand. So typically for most drugs, we have to keep at least a month on hand. Fast movers, we try to keep at least 2 months on hand, because there are some weeks where something might happen that might delay a flight, or maybe our packages didn't make it on the flight, and so now we're not going to get any deliveries for that week. So you gotta have enough inventory on hand to sustain. Also, we have to choose, our purchasing guys have to choose between air freight and barge freight. So if something is heavy, it's going to be expensive on air freight. So usually the big, bulky, heavy stuff, they'll order by barge, but if it's coming by barge, it's going to take 4 to 5 weeks to get here. So for example, our 1,000-count metformin bottles, they're big and heavy, and we'll order 15, 20 at a time, and so typically they'll order those by barge, and especially since that one's a fast mover, we can kind of time it to basically order a set amount every 2 weeks, because we order barge orders every 2 weeks and air every week. And so it's a little difficult sometimes trying to parse through, what you should air order, what you should freight order, what can or can't be.
Planning with that, yeah.
How about your technology there, Joshua? What technology are you using behind the bench there?
So our pharmacy software, we're currently using QS1, which is about to sunset the next few years. And so we've been talking with other software vendors. So that's one thing. I'd say the biggest drawback with technology here is with our Medicaid program. Unfortunately, our Medicaid program's not online, so it's all manual paper billing, and that's about...
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's about half of our population here is Medicaid. And so that's a huge chunk of our volume that's... You just have to know, what's covered, you have to know what requires a PA, so that when you submit your billing, that everything is there. So if you submit your billing and it doesn't have a PA, but should have had a PA, your claim is denied and you're just not getting paid for it.
You just lost Alan at manual.
Is that because of the QS1 system won't do that, or for other reasons?
Yeah, it's because Medicaid is still not online yet. So everyone from pharmacy, primary care, everything, anyone and everyone here has to bill Medicaid manually, and so it's a
so even if
process.
you're using something like Pioneer, it wouldn't be any different. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but there are a lot of things coming up though with Medicaid. They're recently supposed to be contracting with a company that's going to start their very first module. So even patients applying for Medicaid, they have to print out the forms, fill them out, and you have to drop them off when Medicaid is open. So I think the first thing they're going to do is their E&E modules, enrollment and eligibility. So our beneficiaries can apply online. That's going to be, a huge game changer for people to be able to apply online. Also, just getting their cards. I mean, imagine we have patients that come and say that they've been approved for Medicaid. They just haven't received their Medicaid card in the mail, which we heard can take up to 2 months for them to get.
Wow. Wow.
And, they come to your pharmacy, they say they have approved Medicaid, but they don't have the card. And for us, because everything's manual, we have to have a copy of the card in order to bill Medicaid, and to, tell them, oh, we can't put it on your Medicaid, you have to pay for it because we don't have your card. And it's difficult.
For planning and purchasing purposes in that situation, do you have a lot of your patients like med synced? And so like their normal medications, you're kind of already have an idea of what you're ordering each month?
Yeah, so we try to med sync what we can. Anything that is either a high dollar or unique item, we kind of create a special orders list, and so we have someone at each store that goes through their special orders list so they can see when someone's going to be due for a medication, and then they make sure that they're ordered like the week prior to their due date.
And how about like icons or robots? Are you using any of that technology in your stores?
We don't hear. I think maybe one of our stores would be busy enough to be able to use one of the robots. Initially, up until a couple years ago, the problem always was, we'd go to these, idea share conferences, and, I'll talk to McKesson, I'll talk to Parada, and, a lot of these companies, and they've got these nice machines that can do all this cool fancy stuff, and usually my first question would be, do you guys service in Saipan?
And, that's a great question.
It's usually like, where's that? And it's like, okay. But
here we go again.
Yeah, and so
that's a really good point.
That's always an issue. Is we can purchase it, but for one, will they ship it to us? And then two, if something breaks, will it get serviced? So that's always difficult. But I know companies like Parada recently, in the last couple of years, I think, have someone stationed on Guam, which is, half an hour flight from us. So they said they would be able to service us out here.
Great.
But yeah, so at least that's a plus and improvement.
Yeah. Interesting. So what are some other, like you mentioned this earlier, but what are some of those unique approaches to patient care that you're doing outside of like filling scripts? Like, do you do any sort of long-term care? Like what are some unique approaches?
That's a good question, Austin. And because Joshua, this would apply to anyone. And we have lots of clients that they may be in the U.S., but they are in very remote locations or, island sort of situations. So we kind of hear these same issues, even though maybe not to the extent of yours. But so yeah, what do you do to overcome some of that?
For us, I think I would have to say Saipan is behind the times probably with regard to services, and we're still trying to catch up out here. For instance, vaccinations at pharmacies really only started 2 or 3 years ago, and that's because our vaccinations have always been free through public health, and so no one really had a need to start a vaccination program. But I think it started a few years ago, just with the not really demand, but being able to access that kind of care and not have to wait for public health or sometimes if everyone's trying to get their flu vaccine, this time of year, sometimes you can have to go through some extensive lines. But so vaccines are one. Recently, we started talking with some compounding companies. That also seemed to be a big trend at the conferences, to try to go through, more cash-based programs and things that don't have to process through a PBM. So those are things that we're talking with. There's one cosmetic clinic here, and we're trying to be able to provide some services for them.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you, but since you attended the NCPA ownership workshop, what did you think about the workshop?
I think it was good. I mean, it definitely opened my eyes to just the way things are seen, that are just different to here. The marketing things I thought were really interesting. Just how, they would, visit a store and kind of transform it a little bit. And sometimes it wasn't a huge change, aesthetically or physically, but it made a huge difference. Sometimes it's just rearranging how you do things. And so I think the marketing aspect was really kind of eye-opening, and seeing the changes that we could make. And so we're actually in the process of changing our whole front end. We just changed our will call bin yesterday. We finally finished it. It took us a couple days to do it, but we have a brand new will call bin that I think will make things more efficient for pickup, instead of spending so much time digging through bags. And so we made that more efficient. And yeah, our OTCs, we're kind of slowly switching out the shelves. I really like the idea about, instead of having just a DME section where you've got walkers and canes and this and that, but like creating a whole mobility center. That I was like, wow, that's brilliant. We definitely need to use that. And so yeah, I think that was probably one of the big takeaways. And my partner that came with me is my purchasing manager. I think that was also his highlight as well.
Yeah, they really do a great job of touching on so many different areas in a really quick 48-hour window. So, but I love to hear our friend Gabe speak. He's one of the guys that did, he just changes the color of a sign or changes the way some chairs are in the pharmacy, and it makes all the difference in the world. That's one of my favorites to watch.
And we have the follow-up ownership workshop next week in New Orleans at the NCPA convention. So you should come out to that.
Yeah, you should come out and hang out with us.
I wish I could. I wish it was a short flight for me.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet. Well, let me ask this question. For somebody considering ownership in a non-traditional or remote setting like you are, what thoughts or suggestions would you have if I were looking for something like that? What would you do differently?
Yeah, I think, making sure that you have some sort of like a niche service. If you're kind of just doing the same thing as everyone else, be a little difficult. So this company, before I took it over, this company is actually going to be making 30 years next year. It was the first outpatient, first real pharmacy in the islands. So things have expanded since then. So it started as only a pharmacy in the hospital. It's just an outpatient pharmacy, and that's where everyone on island would go to get their meds. But population kind of grew since then, and so more locations have popped up. But now our population is sort of on a decline, just because there's a lot of economic troubles that we're having out here, which I won't go into because that'll be a whole nother podcast. But
we'll have you back for another episode.
Yeah. But yeah, I think having a niche service would be the way to go. And actually have some ideas about doing that. I just haven't really pulled the trigger on it because I'm a big data person, so I kind of have to run the numbers and make sure certain things are going to work. I think definitely doing something a little different. Also, location. I never really touched on the size of Saipan, but it's about 44 square miles. Now is down to about 40,000. So the island is somewhat about 4 miles by 8 miles or so. No. Something like that. No, that's 4 by 12. Sorry, about 4 by 12. But it's 44 square miles. So it doesn't really take much longer than 20 minutes to drive anywhere on this island. But you'd be surprised, having someone drive an extra 5 minutes is a big deal here.
Yeah.
And so, coming from the States, for someone saying, "Oh, I got to go back home and get this," that's 5 minutes. And we're just like, okay, 5 minutes. That's should be around the corner. Or in the States, you can drive an hour.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, even here, there's so many where I live. There's so many choices of pharmacies, and it's like if I have to drive an extra 5 minutes,
why would you do that?
Right. why would I do it when I can just go right up the road? So I think that's huge.
However, I drive 15 miles to go to my pharmacy. So.
Well, but that's the other point I was going to make there is that,
I basically live in Saipan, according to
that was the other point I was going to make, though, is that if they have a niche, if they have a niche thing that they offer that I can't get anywhere else, then I'll happily make the drive. Right.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie lives in Saipan East anyway. So, I mean, you can bicycle around your island, and Bonnie has to drive for an hour to get even to the office when she comes. So
yeah.
Well, we really appreciate it, Josh. Yeah, it is. We really appreciate it. It kind of gives perspective to, even though it's a different situation, that the things that you're dealing with, it's very similar, actually. Everyone has their own.
Except you have to barging metformin for a 4 or 5 week period of time.
Correct.
It gives you some concept of how you have to deal with inventory. I mean, I can't. I'm sure once you figure it out, what your time frames are for either air freight delivery or barge delivery, it's not like next day delivery on everything that everybody here is accustomed to. So I can't imagine some of those challenges that you have.
And the thing with that too is, most pharmacies don't have to pay excise tax when your freight hits the port. We have to pay a 1% excise tax of our entire cost that we spend with, McKesson. We have to pay an additional 1% of that at the port. plus we have to pay freight charges, which right now is, about $200,000 a year.
Wow.
Those things can also add up for us. And there's a lot of, I'd say a big issue for us here is access. Because of where we are, we can't do, for example, reverse distribution of controlled substances. They just don't allow it from this region. And I'd say a big thing, which I'm actually working with our congressional delegate, is manufacturer copay programs. Most of them don't include territories. Some of them do, or they'll say the 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, what about the rest of us? And so thankfully, delegate, I'm working with one of her staffers to try to get some of these manufacturers to include our territory for these programs. So, for instance, Jardiance, we've got lots of patients on Jardiance, and our government insurance here is through Aetna, through CVS Caremark, and the copay is like $119 or something a month, and there's a lot of patients who can't afford that, and that can be difficult. But we've got other programs like Farxiga. It's also $100-something a month, but their program does include the territories, and so we can bring that down to zero copay. And so those are the kind of things that also make our recommendations with providers more relevant. Is, hey, I know we've got this drug that's good, but this one the patient's not going to pay, so they're more likely going to get that one as opposed to paying all this money for this other one. So
how about GLP-1s? Are you doing much with GLP-1s there?
Yeah, we do some. We do a number of Ribelsis and Ozempic, and now more recently we're starting to get some patients on a lot of the other stuff from Zepbound to Mounjaro and those. But I think the difficulty is getting them approved on their insurance first before we can get these other programs to kick in. But yeah, and even then, there's still contracting issues sometimes with some of the manufacturer programs. So I just ran one yesterday for a drug it's kind of a new drug. We only have one patient on it, and so I figured, well, let me see if we can use their manufacturer program. And even though it's a BIN and PCN that we're used to billing, it doesn't necessarily mean that manufacturer has allowed us on. And so sure enough, I billed it, and it says pharmacy not participated with this program. And so it's like, oh, well, we tried. But
Would you see yesterday, Alan, that Costco is going to start selling GLP-1s?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, for cash.
Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me at all.
I'm assuming that Saipan doesn't have a Costco, right?
Negative. Yeah, no Costco. We do have a we have something that we call a pseudo Costco. We have it's a sort of wholesale type of company. One of our main local chains, if you will, is a company called Joten, and they're one of the chain, large locally owned chain supermarkets, and they have a wholesale company that is sort of like a Costco. It'll look like a Costco, but it's much smaller. They don't have a bakery or meat department.
Same idea.
Any of those, yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, Josh, it's been a real pleasure for us to talk with you in this mechanism, and I'm sure you probably need to get to work this morning. We hope we'll run into you again at some type of later trade show or
sure.
event, and we'd love to take you out to eat. So please let us know if you come to the States to attend any events, because most likely we'll be there exhibiting, talking, or whatever the case may be. We're going to be again at the convention next week, so love to entertain you if you come back.
Yeah, it's very nice
Perfect.
to meet you.
Will
Thanks for taking some time out of your day to